Next up, we have Jeffrey Horn. He's the father of 4 children, a grassroots activist, and a data scientist. Earning his Bachelor's of Science degree from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He also holds a master's degree in mathematics and a PhD in computer science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Professional programmer, he works daily to build infrastructure that can be used to leverage big data and improving advertising, medical decisions, investing, and more. Very conscientious of the tension that exists between technology and personal freedom. He has been educating and advocating against Common Core and high-stakes testing in Wisconsin for several years. Over the course of 2013 to 2014, he spearheaded an initiative to unite a variety of organizations and individuals on Common Core-related issues for the purpose of sending several open letters to the state-level public officials in Wisconsin. The letters ultimately helped to ensure a series of public hearings on Common Core at locations around the state in 2013. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey Horn.
Well, it's about 4 o'clock now. I guess we're a little beyond time here, but I wanted to ask you all, it's 4 o'clock and you know where your data is? I guarantee you most of you probably have no clue how much data you generate on a daily basis and how much of it is sold, resold, repackaged, and disseminated over the internet and through other private channels. Some of you are probably aware that when you like something on Facebook, that's recorded. People actually do things with that information. When you make a search on the internet, that's recorded and people do things with that information. I think far fewer people realize that that data is packaged and resold and that other people not Google, not Facebook, are using that information to find out and make conclusions about you. To some extent, we've kind of agreed that that's an okay thing. You can read the terms of service on Facebook or Google or any of these websites, and I guess you realize that you get enough value from Facebook, get enough value from Google to make it all worth it. It's kind of a trade. Trade my information, things about me, in order for your service. I think people are a lot less clued into what's happening with their personal information. That could be your financial information, could be your health information. And today we're going to talk about what's actually happening to your educational information and the information about your children. I think people don't realize that a lot of these tests that we just talked about don't only test the mathematics, don't only test the English. They're actually asking a lot of questions that go to other things. And the Department of Education has actually said that they're looking for these assessments to look for attributes like dispositions and social skills, attitudes, and interpersonal resources. People don't realize that the databases that the federal government is giving grants to the states to build are not only holding the information at a state level. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think the information is kept in their school district. Personally identifiable data is now going to the state. There's money being given to build connections. There's memorandums of understanding being fostered between technical college systems and the University of Wisconsin, Department of Workforce Development, Department of Health. That all feeds into this, so that people can start drawing conclusions about exactly how your children are doing, and exactly why that's happening. They're measuring for things in children like recognizing biases in sources, how flexible they are, whether they're culturally aware, whether they have an appreciation for diversity, whether they're the kind of people that like to work with others and collaborate, or whether they're the kind of people that like to go it on their own, whether they have empathy, whether they can take perspective, whether they're trusting or not, whether they're service-oriented and like to help people, really like that. And whether they have social influence, whether they're a leader or follower. Those are things that can be detected in these tests and models built about to try to form an assessment of what kind of child you have. It's not just whether they can read a paragraph and understand it. It's not just whether they can factor a polynomial. It's all of those things. And what's really scary is this, that the people making those decisions are not your trusted public officials at the Department of Public Instruction, not just them. They're not just maybe a researcher at the university. That information is increasingly being given to people almost just for the asking. That includes corporations who might want to use it to market instructional materials, which you might think are a benefit to your child. For instance, they might want to find out who certain tutoring services would be helpful for. That information means money in their pocket, but it also means a loss of privacy for your children. I want to talk to you a little bit about data mining. That's the kind of thing I do every day. What data mining is kind of not very well understood by most people. They hear it, they kind of understand that there's this big pile of data and we're going to sift through it. They figure someone must know what they're doing, and they'll find that needle in a haystack. And essentially data mining is just that. It's using a vast amount of data to extract value. But you have to ask who that value is for. The value is for someone. Someone's getting an advantage from that data. You'd like to think that the person getting that advantage is your child, that there's going to be improved curriculum. And maybe some of that's going on. But more and more what you're seeing is that the people getting the value from this are actually our corporations.
Teach.
Are what?
Teach.
Teach? Oh, okay. And there's also a lot of people getting, essentially, I guess, negative value from this. We heard Dr. Thompson talk about how fear is really being measured here. So you're taking this big pile of data under stress, building models about it to do things like he's talked about, that you are talking about which students might be at risk for suicide, which students might be at risk to join gangs, which students might be at risk to drop out of high school. You're taking under stress information, making these kind of inferences, and then the case studies will all show the person that was saved. This child's suicide was prevented because we had this in place, detected it and saved him. And that's great. But what they don't show is the many students who this was detected and an intervention was taken and there wasn't really a problem there and their lives were upset unnecessarily on an ongoing basis. They don't tout those kind of things. They don't tout what this is actually doing to teachers. We have teachers who, again, have students under stress. And those students' assessments are coming in and identifying what we're told are students that have problems with English or problems with mathematics. What they really have is problems taking tests. And what we're actually getting are teachers, we're throwing teachers out whose children do poorly. We're keep retaining teachers whose students do well. But what we're getting are teachers who can teach children how to cope. We're not getting teachers that know how to teach the mathematics or teach the English necessarily. To a large extent, we're getting teachers who can teach kids how to cope. I think a lot of people think that the computers that come up with these decisions, that these models are built, that they're all very statistically valid. I want you to know for certain that the kind of things you see on the internet, the Facebook and the Google stuff, they're not statistically valid. They don't need to be. Because what's at stake is not really a big deal on the internet. What's at stake there is that, well, I showed you an ad, and you either liked it and clicked on it and bought something, or you didn't. It's not a big deal in the scheme of things. Now, if I take a bunch of data and I make a decision about your child, about what he can or cannot do with his future, about whether is really college material or whether, he better look for some other idea to support himself. And I do that earlier and earlier, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and that starts labeling that child. Those decisions made by a computer have major consequences. They should be almost certain, but they're not. These data science methods are not statistical. They're often artificial intelligence methods that at best give you a good inkling or a guess. They might say, well, maybe this student really doesn't like math right now. But because of the way it's practiced, you start to see the non-experts, the people at the school level say, well, the computer said, he shouldn't be in an engineering program. He should stay in technology and do something a little less ambitious. The computer said that maybe teaching isn't for this person. Even though she really likes it, she doesn't have the right skills. And see, the whole problem with this is that the computer said, first of all, this isn't valid. The computer said this and doesn't really know. We're taking tests that are taken under anxiety and valid to begin with. We're applying methods that really aren't that sound either. Coming to conclusions and then starting to use those conclusions like they're fact. This is a major circumvention, I think, of the democratic system, too. You need to step back and look at that. And it's almost unassailable, because today we think, just think of that. How many times, well, the computer said it. It's got to be true. There's smart people programming those computers. The computers do wonderful things. We see them every day. We're amazed by it. And the computer said this career is not for you, or maybe you have to go to college. It's almost unassailable. We talk about accountability. What we've done is we've basically set up a system that's completely unaccountable. By saying the computer said it, you can't argue. No one knows what's going on inside there. They don't come to you with, here's the methods that we're using to actually produce these results. They just say the computer said it. The system said that your child, we've come to this conclusion for your child. What accountability should be is not accountability to the state, or not accountability to the computer. It should be accountability to the parent and accountability to the teacher. There's a fundamental relationship that's stuck. And this is true in general of the world today. We've given up on our relationships. Okay, there's so many families that would rather talk to their child over Skype, who's the child being on the floor above them, than to go and have that discussion. There's so many people that would rather email that teacher rather than talk to that teacher. And this is just another example of that. Rather than a teacher using her gifts to come to a conclusion about what a child's problem is by actually interacting with that child, perhaps in a way that's not mandated in a curriculum manual, just using the art and her gifts. Instead of doing that interaction, coming to a conclusion, talking to the parents, what are we doing? We're taking an assessment, we're shipping it to the state, We're having the state jumble it up with stuff from all across the country. We're having algorithms find patterns in that data. We're finding that pattern that fits the student, and the answer comes back and it says, here's the problem. Even if it's right, look at what we've lost. We've lost all of the humanity in teaching. We've given away essentially our freedom as well. We are now bound to what? Technology. We've given up on, it used to be that, okay, we've given up on the teachers, we'll listen to the experts. But now it's not even the experts. We're listening to a computer. Programmed by who? We don't know. So ultimately, we have these computers deciding on students' futures, and not who are the primary people it should be. It should be the parents and that child in consultation with the teachers. We've given up. That's attractive to a lot of people in today's society, and it's a sad thing. They don't want the responsibility, because it's hard work. It's hard work to be a parent. It's hard work to be a teacher. Well, in some ways, it's a lot easier now. Or you're told what you're going to do. You're told what's going to be on that test. That's it. And then the answers are going to come back to you. All of your art, all of your humanity is gone. So some people find that comforting. I don't. I want to talk a little bit more about a couple things that are being measured in these assessments that I find particularly troubling. There was an article, a piece put out by the Department of Education called Promoting Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance. And it got a lot of acclaim because it had a lot of almost sci-fi looking apparatus that people, I think, assumed would be in every classroom, which isn't the case. But I think people should sit back if you get a chance and read through some of that, because one of the things that they make a particular point of what students in the next 10, 20 years need to do, is they need to develop coping mechanisms, essentially. They say, students can develop psychological resources that promote grit, tenacity, and perseverance, including effortful control, in which students are constantly faced with tasks that are important for long-term goals, but that in the short term may not feel desirable or intrinsically motivating. Successful students by themselves, or with the support of others, marshal willpower and regulate their attention in the face of distractions. And I find this particularly interesting with what Dr. Thompson said. These tests are essentially ways of testing that. They're ways of coping with boredom and anxiety. 13 hours of tests. I almost believe that they don't really care whether you know the math. They don't really care whether you know the English. They care whether you can cope. Because I think someone in their wisdom has decided that those coping mechanisms are what's needed in the future so that you can do your job. We want our school, this is being funded, in my opinion, by industry to such an extent because they see the need for compliant workers who are willing to put up with this level of boredom on the job. And in fact, I know that to some extent because the Gates Foundation financed, among many other things, a paper on called the Framework for Multi-State Human Capital Development Data Systems. And it calls for the creation of a multi-state system for tracking the stock and flow of skills and abilities represented by education and training of various populations within a given state. They also call for that to be a system where states can then share that information across states, and they're basically describing what we're building. Oh, is an interesting term. The stock of skills is simply the inventory of skills that children have. And the flow of those skills is how well that inventory matches in a population actually matches what industry needs. The report actually contains continues, it says, reorienting accountability arrangements around longitudinal data acknowledges that developing productive citizens is a core goal of all levels of education. While workforce development is not the only goal of education, it is the one that is the most systematically measurable. Through existing data collection activities undertaken by the state and federal agencies responsible for labor market information, focusing on workforce development also acknowledges that students and families throughout the nation typically say that the principal reason for seeking a college education is to improve their employment prospects. Finally, this focus recognizes that many of the other benefits of education, including civic engagement, volunteerism, good health, and aesthetic appreciation, tend to accrue disproportionately to those who, by virtue of their employment, have a steady source of income. So, reading between the lines a little bit, what they're saying is, we're going to make damn sure that these kids get good-paying jobs, and we don't really care about whether we're developing good citizens, or people that can appreciate art, or people that are good people, people that have a high moral fiber, people that want to volunteer or engage in their community. What we want to do is create students that are valuable to us. We want to create a flow, a pipeline of students that we can employ. I want to talk just a little bit, I'll get into sort of what testing in Wisconsin means and opting out, some details about that. I want to talk about just one other thing. Talk a little bit about all the data that's being kept, giving a whole new meaning to your permanent record. Your permanent record is going to get a whole lot bigger and a whole lot more permanent. And it's going to be joined to all kinds of other things in your life. And people are going to make decisions for you based on that. But the biggest reason that I think that you need to think about opting your students out of these tests and do it the right way is the message that this whole system is giving to them on a daily basis. Students go in and they see daily, especially if they're getting these formative tests on computers, that they're being monitored on a daily basis, that what they do is being recorded, that what they do is on their permanent record, that what they do is affecting their teacher, that what they do is being watched. Think of that day in and day out for 12 years, 13 years of your school career. You're being watched. We're writing it down. And as you move on through your career, you start seeing some of the results of what you've done. And I guess to some extent that's life, right? I mean, we all went to school and we made some choices, and some things were there for us because we made this choice, and other things were blocked off. But not at this level, not at this minute level. Not if I had a bad day in third grade, or a bad week, or my grandmother died, my mom was blown, or my parents were getting a separation. That really could affect in sixth grade what my opportunities are. But that's the message they're getting. They're getting it reinforced every day, every year, that we're watching you, we're recording what you're doing, and we're making decisions for you based on it. So there's that. They get that reinforced every day. And then they see who maybe besides their parents is probably one of the biggest role models in their life, their teacher, having value-added measures, essentially saying, we're watching you too. And your job is on the line here. You're going to go if you don't do well enough. And you're only going to get promoted or get that raise if you do. I see that rolling the whole day in and day out. And they think to themselves, I think, this is how it must be. This is normal. It's normal to have daily assessments and rankings. And that's what happens. That's what happens with these formative tests. And they try to color it by saying that, okay, well, the teachers had to give their lesson, they have this formative test, and they go back and look at the results. But it's essentially a ranking. They do the same kind of things in lots of businesses today, and how efficient you are in the warehouse, or how efficient you are stocking, or how efficient you are. That's coming, folks. And if it isn't, it's even in service industries, call centers do it all the time. It's everywhere. And I actually feel that's one of the things that they're preparing our students for. It's normal. The message is it's normal in a job to be watched, recorded in detail, and ranked. And to some extent maybe it is, but not at this level. See, everything's sort of been ramped up, almost ridiculous levels. So there's really two prongs of this, two reasons why I think you should opt your children out of these tests. And I'm going to get real specific about what you should say, because you need to opt them out because of the data that's going to be stored in perpetuity on this. You also need to stop it now because it's scarring your children. It's sending them the wrong message. There's room for tests. Tests should be there as a tool for a teacher to understand, what they can do better, or if their kids understood or not, so I can try it a different way. They shouldn't be there as a judgment, a final verdict on how good you are. And that's the message we're giving to our kids. Now you need to know that in Wisconsin, the Office of Student Assessment has basically said that Smarter Balance tests are going to be given this spring in English Language Arts in grades 3 through 8. That's going to happen. Mathematics and English. Those will all be given in spring 2015. In grades 9, 10, 11, in Wisconsin, we do the ACT tests, which are aligned with Common Core as well. So this is coming, so that's the kind of time frame. I'm going to talk about writing a letter and what needs to sort of be in it. But the time frame is you need to have that ready. Think about doing it over Christmas break if you haven't done it already. In Wisconsin, you have the right to opt out of standardized testing during the testing window. Opt-out requests is granted from the local district, so you don't have to write DPI or anything or get anything from them. You have to write your local district, your superintendent, probably copy your principal, and your students' teachers. A parent request is all that's needed to opt out in Wisconsin. You don't need to have any psychologist like you might for an IEP. You don't need to have any supporting documentation. You just simply need to request it. You don't need to say it's for religious reasons or any reason at all. It's fine to request an opt-out just because. If you want to add that other stuff in, that's fine. Under Wisconsin statute 118.30, titled Pupil Assessment, the subparagraph is actually 2B, sections 3 through 6. It says, upon the request of a pupil's parent or guardian, the school board shall excuse the pupil from taking an examination administered under subsection 1. That's it. So if the school comes back to you and asks for supporting documentation, simply refer to this state laws. It is 118.30, titled Pupil Assessment, subparagraph 2B, 3 through 6. The other thing many school districts are going to tell you is that non-participation is going to be held against tug on your heartstrings. They're going to say, well, you know, we'd love to do this, but here's the problem we have, that if we let your student opt out, we're going to get zeros for that student. It's going to drag us down, and we're not going to get the A or B that was coming to us on the state grades for schools. We're going to do poorly. That's also not true with respect to state law. Section 113.30, subsection 5M says, when determining the percentage of pupils participating in the program, under the previous section, who performed at designated proficiency levels in the examination administered as required under this other subsection, the department shall consider only pupils participating in the program to whom examinations were administered at each grade level, and shall exclude from consideration those pupils participating in the program who were excused from taking the examinations. So if your student is excused from the examinations because, for any reason really, but especially for parental opt-out, they're not going to count. They're not going to count for or against. The one thing they will account for, and they will count towards this, and there is some benefit to the school for the participation rate. Simply the number of students in the school that participated will be lower, and there may be some funding tied to that. So they're right in some sense, but don't let them exaggerate that too much. And you know what? So what? Okay, you're sending your children to school to whatever your goals are, but probably to be better citizens or to, you know, maybe to get a good job, maybe there's all sorts of reasons, but you're not sending them there to make sure that the school does well with the state. For which one?
113.
It's 118.30, and if you go on the legislative website, that whole thing is probably worth reading because it all has to do with opt-out and various considerations. Some of it has to do with funding for the districts and what it all means. In particular, the first one was subparagraph 2B, 3 through 6, and the second part about non-participation is subsection 5M. 118.3. 118.3. So, I'd just like to have a couple thoughts here. Some of these are maybe summary of what I've said, but I just really want to drive home what teaching, what testing, and data collection and data mining is really teaching our students. It's teaching them you're being monitored, get used to it, even on a daily basis. We, the district, the state, are intimately in your business. And that they should expect to be monitored in their jobs when they get out of school, too. Value-added scores for teachers are reducing teachers to simply a number. It's kind of funny to even tout that we're reducing schools and districts to a letter grade, when in reality you should find that kind of offensive. This is a complex matter having to do with not just one mind, it's complex enough, but thousands of minds, and the interactions between them, between teachers and students, and we're reducing it to a single letter. That's very easy to understand, but it glosses over a whole lot of truth. It objectifies teachers and objectifies entire communities because of that. It's teaching them that deviation will not be tolerated. You get some of this feedback when your kids come home with Discovery Math. Especially if you're not fluent in Discovery Math. The interaction usually goes like this. I need help with my homework tonight. Okay, let's take a look at it. They sit down and do the multiplication problem and they draw their lattice, which most parents in our generations have no clue what to do. They're like, well, that's new. Maybe you can teach me how to do that. But the problem is the kid doesn't get it. looking to the parent for help. So the parent puts in a lot of time probably figuring out how that works, and maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But they're certainly not an expert at explaining it at this point, because they're just picking it up. So the parent does the next best thing. It's like, well, I think I have a trick for you. This is how they taught it when I was a kid. They proceed to do it. And maybe the child gets it. Maybe it's straightforward and they understand. And they complete their whole assignment. Some of it with the help of the parent. By the end, they're feeling really enthused because I can figure this out. I know how to do this. They take it into school. They hand it in. And they get a terrible grade. Because what's being tested here, what's being trained, is not, we want you to figure it out. We want you to be creative, persistent, and find a way. What they're being taught is, we want you to do it this way. Even if you get the right, you've seen this, even if you get the wrong answer, if you did it the right way, and you wrote a paragraph explaining why it's the right way, you're going to get more credit than the kid that did it the old way. We want compliance. We will not tolerate deviation, even if you're wrong. You're also telling our kids that you're a score. You're not a unique individual. You are the sum total of your test results. If your test results are bad, you're bad. If your test results are good, you're good, and you're good. And lastly, and I really think this is true, that it's so unfortunate that we've got really dedicated teachers, and I'm sure the science is full of very dedicated, loving parents. But this whole setup is really diminishing the reliance on you. It's diminishing how necessary you are. It's setting up a system where parents are not needed, and many, many fewer teachers and many much less skilled teachers are needed. Because it's just a system. We present it, they listen, they get tested, and they repeat. It doesn't take a teacher with a lot of skill, that's seen a lot, that's creative, that has a lot of determination. What it takes is a teacher that's willing to put up with it. We've ceded that reliance to the state, to experts, and to algorithms. In today's society, we're much too reliant on experts in technology. It's a beautiful thing. We have some wonderful things and gifts in this country because of it, but we better be careful. Because when they become our masters, we're all in for a really rude awakening. That's going to be right on the horizon with us. So, I'm just proposing, please, if you have children in school, if you have grandchildren that are in public schools, or even private schools too that are going to Common Core, write the letter. It's so easy to just say, yeah, I'm not too in favor of that, let's just see. You need to write that letter. You need to opt them out. It's only by doing that that they're going to get the message that enough of us are upset with this. And we can win this, but we can't win it sitting on our couches at home, yelling at our televisions. We need to start yelling at the people that are doing this. You can talk to your school district, talk to your principals, talk to your teachers, talk to your legislators. There's still time, and we can still do this. Get in gear, let's get it done, okay?